everyone, and welcome to The Backline with Rob and Adam. My name is Rob Norman, author of the cool improv book, Improvising Now, a practical guide to modern improv.
And my name is Adam Colley, alumnus of the Second City main stage.
Adam, how are you?
I'm doing great. Um, we are a bi-coastal couple now, and so our timing is all off. We're keep checking, and you checked in. It was like, hey, we're ready to go, and I was like, nope, it's 11:30. Wait, 11:30? Whose time? And so this is an early morning podcast for me, and I'm here for. You're the first person I've talked to all day.
Oh my gosh. For me, I've been up for a while. You know, I wanted to improve this podcast. I wanted to boost the gain of my microphone by like 10%. And so I did all this research. In the morning, I got up, I went to the store, I bought this like RP1 Phantom Power pre-gain, and I plugged it all in. And as soon as I plugged it in, everything stopped working. So it's been a frantic morning of me running around trying to improve something by such a little amount and ending up screwing up everything. And I'm actually back to my original setup right now. So a very Sisyphusian morning for me. And cheers.
Yeah, I can tell when you get really frustrated. It's not like you never see like Rob go like, "Oh my god, I don't know what to do." You get calmer, which
Yeah.
it's like a thriller where it's like Hannibal Lecter. It's like, why aren't you freaking out? You're just really calm. It's like, oh, because you're planning something awful. Your frustration is very much, yeah, I got into a car accident and the guy left the scene and it looks like I'm going to be in debt for the rest of my life. Anyway, how are you? That's when I know things are rough for Rob.
A bunch of people died in the car crash. It looks like I'll be going to jail for vehicular manslaughter. So yeah,
Some
no, it is a shutting down for sure, dude. It's me being like, okay, this is too much. It's kind of like a self-soothing thing. Anyways, Adam, how are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm sorry about your gain issues, but the way you were
Oh,
talking about your gain issues, I was like, oh, that's the way people like talk about the gym. Like when I get excited about like I got this new protein powder, and it's like, oh, 30 grams per scoop, takes 2 scoops per shake. Oh, it's this kind of BCAAs, and it's like I don't know why people who are into one culture can't get along with people into the audio culture, because we're just excited about new ideas. We're excited about new, very specific things that get us jacked up. So that was very funny, but I'm very good. Some interesting things happening. Some very interesting things happening. Um,
interesting. Hmm.
oh, um, did you know that there's a theater that is just coming back from the dead?
Like every theater around the world?
Some temporarily shut down and said, "Hey, we'll be back in a little bit." However, IO, we were told, is shut
Mm,
down, and
forever.
the Annoyance just posted a message a few days ago saying that IO's coming back. Very shocking. So, just to give a little background, during the pandemic, massive changes happened around the world. And people who were involved in IO started to call out some of the problems that were happening there, such as students not being properly refunded for classes, especially intensives that are, 5 weeks, so the price goes way up. Not only did they not get their intensive, but they were having trouble getting their money back. Other
Mm,
issues include sexism, institutional racism, and Sharna Halpern, who ran the theater, kind of put it out online saying, "Well, then I'm done. I
yeah.
if you have all these problems with this theater, then I'm done." And this kind of more recently opened IO version was shuttered, and we were all under the impression that it's gone. Being in LA, we've seen this already. We saw it with IO West. IO West came up, was thriving, and then just kind of very quickly, without any notice, closed, surprising the teachers and staff of IO West. So we assumed IO is gone. And the Annoyance put out that under the guidance of Mick Napier and Jennifer Eslin, they will be working with the new owners of IO and reopening it. and
Hmm.
they're excited about it. I think everyone in Chicago is excited about it. I think people around the world are excited about the potential of this new theater with incredible changes opening again. And I think one of the most popular improv theaters in the world being reopened with new owners under the guidance of Mick and Jennifer seems like a good thing for all of us.
Yeah, so I mean, a couple things that we should probably just also set up is IO is short for Improv Olympic. It was started by Sharna and David Shepard. Um, David left, and Del Close kind of became the artistic visionary, the powerhouse at IO, and this is really where the Herald was born. The Anoints Theater is a very subversive political satire. Um, yeah, they do musicals, they do sketch shows, they also do improv, and they have a very particular style um, that you and I both are big fans of Mick Napier and Susan Messing. Um, so this transformation, this return of the IO, it brings up a lot of questions for us, which is, what purpose does the institution serve? Because when IO was toasted, immediately a bunch of people went to fill that space. I had a couple friends who started their own theater company there, and this company was intended to kind of fix all of the things that perhaps IO missed over years and years of running. You have a company, and of course, as time goes on, it's going to make mistakes. People are going to get frustrated with it, and it feels like during the pandemic, all of those frustrations came to a head, and Sharna decided basically to kind of quit in a. It felt very punitive the way IO shuttered. It was kind of like, you're demanding too much from me, and if this is what you want from me as a community leader, then I just don't want any part of it, and I'll just not only leave, but I'll also shut the whole thing down. So the return of IO is interesting. It is a return of Herald based improv, very specific style, different than UCB. I have no idea what that will mean for the theater companies that quickly tried to create their own theaters that was occupying that kind of long form space. Um, but it'll be very, very interesting to see. I don't know. I don't know what happens when things like UCB or IO shut down, if that necessarily is always a good thing for the improv community. I
Well,
don't know, Adam.
here in LA, the exact kind of thing that you were describing in Chicago is happening here.
Mm-hmm.
iOS shut down pre-pandemic, but in the middle of the pandemic, Second City, Hollywood, physically shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Both UCB theaters shut down, and the same thing happened. People rose to fill that power vacuum. Um, People started creating their own online improv schools. People started to create kind of like new theaters are popping up that are shared by sketch, stand up, improv, clown. People are just looking for a space, like a physical space to perform. But as we've talked about many times, um, those spaces have no artistic direction other than the people who are in their individual troops deciding what they want to do. And so there's tons of room for exploration and creating new things rather than just photocopying the people that have come before you. So there's potential for new improv ideas to come out, new spaces to emerge, and spaces and theater companies to emerge with the knowledge of all of our past failures to come together and say, well, as we create this new theater, there's some things that we have to keep in mind that maybe we never thought of before. So it does definitely has the potential to bring about a brand new wave of spaces, people, and teams. It'll be interesting though, as you said, because IO, if anyone's been in their theaters, I mean, Second City does the same thing, so does UCB, but they heavily rely on their alumni and their alumni
Mm,
success to sell their classes and their shows. So
mm-hmm.
even though this is a new iteration of IO, I would imagine they would utilize all of their alumni and say, hey, those people, even though it was 40 years ago and under different artistic direction, etc., they studied here. They are IO alumni. And if you want to be successful, you will study here with us because we've got the track record. And if you want to put that on your resume, that's going to work out real well for you rather than Dave's independent improv workshop.
Dave's great though.
Oh,
Yeah,
we
I mean, I
love
think this
Dave
is
and his independent improv workshops.
I mean, this is a larger conversation. I think this is a whole episode, and yeah, I'd like to talk about it more because when we talk about these kinds of big revolutions within the community, institutions going away, institutions coming back, you know, it's interesting. Starting something new can really improve things and can fix a problem, but also sometimes you go to improve the gain of your microphone by 10%, and you think you can do it, and in doing so you create a situation that's much much worse because you didn't anticipate all of the other problems that come along when you fix that 10%, or maybe there's things that you took for granted that this institution was doing very very well that you have to go and relearn for the first time. So it's very interesting, very complicated. I think Mick and Jen are great people to have in your corner, great mentors. And yeah, I mean, I hope IO does very, very well, but we'll keep an eye out to see what happens next. I also want to keep an eye out on the old backline mailbag. That's at the Backline Pod
Mm.
on Twitter and on Facebook. You can send us a message, you can send us a question, and if you do, we may do what we're about to do today, which is make a whole episode about your question. A lot of great information coming through here. I'm using my phone because of my immense technical issues, so please forgive me. But this is from our
Okay.
friend Martin. Do you remember Martin? We met him at the
We
Copenhagen
love Martin.
International Improv Festival. Yes, great guy, great fella. So he says, Martin here. We met at Copenhagen 22. Yes, we remember that. Thank you for teaching and doing this podcast. So I've been practicing Adam's chorus and verse approach. Maybe it's Rob's approach too. I don't know. Didn't do any workshops with that guy. It's a bit of a burn. I think I have a pretty good handle on it, but my problem is with my students. So Martin learned something from you, Adam, and now he's teaching to his own people. They don't want to stay in the verse and are very laconic. They say two lines and then rush back to the chorus. So I'm trying to think of exercises to practice the verse part of the scene, but I haven't had any luck with it. Do you have any suggestions on how to practice verse? How to get that juice flowing? May the sword be with you, Martin. That's a cool way to end an email. May the sword be with you. So this is a question
Yeah.
that's very specific about a technique that you do called chorus and verse. I think we have to do a lot of background here to talk about what those terms mean before we kind of get to Martin's question. So chorus and verse, AC, what is it?
So chorus and verse. First of all, thank you, Martin, for writing in. May the sword be with you. Martin had this incredible habit of including a sword in so many of his scenes that it became a
Ah,
joke. And so I don't know if this was because I spent the whole week with Martin and his improv partner Rauno, who are both from Estonia and were fantastic to have around all week. Anyway, one of our scenes, one of our epics in Copenhagen. Do you remember we were kind of medieval, and I had a sword, and I was like, oh, I think I've been absorbing Martin's energy in the entire week, and I
ah,
manifested a sword. Anyway, hi Martin. So verse and chorus is just a very a way that helped me understand game of the scene, and it's basically we break down a scene the way I would break down the two major elements of a song, which is the verse and the chorus. The verse is usually the information. So when we think about the who, what, where, the narrative of a scene, it's the same with a song, right? You take Taylor Swift's Shake It Off. We love this song. It's got a very snappy chorus. But it starts off with information. Hey, I just got broken up with by my boyfriend. That's the situation. And I'm very upset about it. So I don't know what to do. I'm struggling. Okay, that's the verse of the song. Just like you would start off with an improv scene. The who, what, where, we get that narrative out there. However, we take a break from that narrative to explore something else. Could be a behavior, could be an attitude, could be a physicality. And in Taylor Swift's version, it is the chorus where she says, shake it off. You shake, 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 shake it off. Great, we love this. And you're thinking, well, this is the part I sing along to. This is the fun part for all of us. It's how you identify the song, much like how you would identify a scene is usually the game of it. So you think, well, let's stay in this shake it off. Let's stay in this game. But just like anything, too much of a good thing can wear out its welcome. So we return to a verse with a heightened narrative. So Taylor Swift, she's at a party, and guess who shows up? Her ex-boyfriend with his new girlfriend. Now things are getting worse. They are heightening this narrative. And what happens? We take a break, and we go back to that behavior, back to that physicality, back to that chorus. And she shakes it off even harder. And again, we return once more to the narrative, and now Taylor Swift heightens it even more. Not only about me, but you out there. If you're going around and you're having trouble, do what I do. We can all do it together. We shake it off. So we both enjoy the narrative aspect and the chorus aspect. But unless we take breaks from them and play a little peekaboo with the audience, we get a chance to miss one. And while we were in one, we can sometimes think about how we can transition to the other and back and forth. And this, for me, really helped me understand the idea of breaking up a scene and allowing games to heighten while also increasing the narrative.
Yeah, and this is definitely a big part of Toronto style improv, I would say. Like listening to you describe it, what you are describing is a way to structure your scenes. And I feel like, your history working at Second City, very early in your career, that was always your goal. You were trying to get into the sketch show. And so you became a very, very good writer. And so your way of understanding an improv scene has that aspect to it. It very much isn't you just saying, I'm going to step into a scene, say yes, and the gods of improv will provide magic to me. You are really kind of figuring out the comedy math that's happening behind all of your offers. So the idea that we would have two parts of a scene, which is a kind of a comedic engine that we know consistently works, and this engine is proven by the audience. So both you and I are kind of giving a series of offers out to the audience, kind of pinging them off the audience. And you can feel it when you find an idea that they are interested in. You can do it again and again and again and again. You're kind of mechanizing this kind of laugh response, which is awesome. But what was so cool about watching you develop this whole idea of chorus and verse was when we started teaching it to our students, there became problems when we were teaching game of the scene, which was people would find that thing that is funny, and then they would just do it over and over and over and over and over again, like an 8-year-old who found a new joke that they like, just repeating the same thing. And chorus and verse addresses that issue, that it doesn't become this kind of verbal game that two people are playing, that it becomes a kind of skeleton that we can hang off other things from it. Like you mentioned with the verse, this new information or this plot or the who, what, where. Basically, your ideas of chorus and verse create pockets within scenes. And so understanding that scenes are going to have these particular kinds of pockets and being able to play within those pockets, and for both people, without saying it out loud, able to understand what pocket we're in, allows us to create more complex and more interesting scenes. And I think chorus and verse is one of the coolest things you've ever created, Adam.
Well, cool. Thanks. Yeah, it's for me again, as we always say whenever we teach, it's like this isn't the way to do things. This is just a way. And for me, again, I always equate things very heavily with sports just because that's how my brain works. But the idea of working out, right? It's like you see some people at the gym and it's like they're beet red, their veins are going, and it's like they're not stopping until they absolutely fail. And then you see others who do their work and then they take a break so they can recharge and they're not going to hurt themselves. And that's all it is, right? this idea of verse and chorus can be so complex at the beginning because it really depends on what kind of show you are doing, right? If you're doing a scenic improv show where they say, hey, every team has 5 minutes, it's a duo show, you got 5 minutes. Cool, great. I think this would work very well. You and I do a half-hour improvised play. Well, yeah, this works, but we stretch it out over 30 minutes. And I think the difference between those two things, the technique is still there, but how we apply it changes. And I always think about the trailer to a movie versus the movie, right? It's the same content, but the trailer has cut out the fat because they know I've only got 3 minutes to entice this person to like this movie. That's like a scenic improv scene or a short form game. You and I, we have to do the actual movie. And so the same elements from the trailer are there, but they're spaced out and they're hit less hard because we know we've got 30 minutes. We know there's not someone else who's going to edit us and we feel like we have to rush. We can take our time. So this is why this technique, I think, is applicable to almost every style, but how it's implemented, you really need to take some personal stock of saying, well, let's break down the mechanics here. How long do I have? How many people are on my team? Who's calling the lights? All of this kind of work. Also, what theater are you playing in? Again, you and I talk about playing in the west coast of Canada, and sometimes we have to ask, what kind of show are we doing? And if the show is a longer narrative, a soap opera, it's like, well, we have to change how we play to make sure that we get the most fun, the people who are hosting us get the most fun, and the audience gets the most fun. So, yeah, I think the application can work in a multiple array of improv, but I think it's up to you to identify how do we apply it based on our circumstances.
Yeah, and I would say for the short form improvisers who might say, well, that doesn't really apply to me. Well, it doesn't apply to you because in the games that you play, they're already kind of built in. So, for example, Oscar Moment does this, which has like a regular scene, and then the director calls Oscar Moment, and then you're in this little pocket. And the game of the scene is how over dramatic can you be? Sounds like a song is the same kind of pockets that we're creating. So, whether you knew it or not, Adam, when you began talking about choruses and verses, these were things that were already kind of in our body. We knew what they were. We just didn't have a way to talk about it. And it is incredible that you haven't updated your reference from Taylor Swift. It confused people when you first started teaching them, and now that it's like 7 years later, it's not any better. Adam hasn't heard a new song since Shake It Off, and I love that. I love that about you. Stay true to your story. So this is chorus and verse. So the question that Martin was asking was he's teaching students to play with chorus and verses. But the issue is that they don't want to stay in the verse. They're doing two lines and then they're going back to the game. And he's trying to kind of make the verses as appetizing for his students as the chorus. Can you maybe talk to me a little bit about when you're on stage? What is the feeling like when you're like, well, I found the game, me and Rob are playing the game and it's working great, but I can feel them getting a little bit bored. Tell me about that feeling of when it's time to transition. How do you know when it's time to go from the chorus to the verse, and likewise from the verse back to the chorus?
And this is probably the most frustrating part because who the hell wants to be in the boring part? Who sings a
Mm,
song and been like, oh man, have you heard that song? And they reference the verse. It's like, no, the verse
hmm
is not the fun part. If you ever if you've ever been in a short form audience or in the show and you give the power of shoulda said to the audience,
Oh yeah.
watch them not understand comic timing because all
hmm
they want is more shoulda saids, right? If you're
Yeah.
not sure what shoulda said is, this is a very simple improv game. Sometimes it's called Take That Back, where Rob and I are doing a scene. Rob says a line of dialogue, and one person in power outside of the scene has the power to yell should have said, and Rob has to change the last line of the last line he spoke to a brand new line of dialogue. But sometimes you give that power to the audience, and the audience is just ravenous. And they're like, should have said, should have said, should have said. And they don't understand that we might need a break. So, the go on.
I was just gonna say, I think it's so funny the way you described it with who has the power. I keep thinking about He-Man.
Talk about old references.
Should have said by the power of Grayskull. Anyways, continue.
Should have said by the power of Snake Mountain. Old skeleton. That's Skeletor's base. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Good.
this is what has been so fucked about the last 2 years, and I'm not sure what's happening in Martin and Rauno's community in terms of live performance, but the audience helps so much with this because, as you said, if you're an improviser, improv is nerve-wracking and scary. If you find something like a game that you're like, oh my God, I found something, why would you ever give that up? You found a roadmap to guide you through this scene that the audience likes. Intellectually, you're like, don't ever stop. But just like anything, we have to take a break. We have to miss it temporarily so that we can enjoy it. The other risk, if we keep hitting the game over the head again and again and again, the audience gets attuned to it, and the risk is them getting ahead of you. And if the audience is doing one of these, for the people just listening, I'm elbowing the fake audience member beside me. They start wanting to prove how funny they are by guessing what's going to be next. It's like if you ever watched a mystery with someone, like, oh, I know who did it. And you're like, cool. I'm just trying to enjoy this. Anyway, that feeling you can get from the audience, right? When that audience wave of laughter starts to dissipate, you can really feel it in your bones. You can feel that lack of interest. But these last 2 years has been very difficult. If you've done any Zoom shows, there's no audience to guide you. There's no audience to cue you in on what game might be something that you should follow. If you didn't pick up on it, but the audience loves it, well, for me, I'm always like, go with the audience. They like it, I'll give you more of that. So that feeling is very difficult. You're leaving something that is safe, that you feel comfortable in, that the audience is enjoying, and saying, I'm going to take a big risk here. I'm going to put this to the side, and I'm going to trust I am able to find something else, do something else to temporarily make the audience distracted with this new thing and make them excited when I return to this game. Often, you're leaving something fun to go to something very boring. You're going to something that is object work. You're going to something that is your environment, your activity, things that the audience cannot see. And so it feels a little counterintuitive to go there. But that feeling that the live audience can give you, that's one of our key indicators. The other is often numbers, right? If you are hitting a game more than 3 times, that for me is that's the cutoff. Going 4 in a row, even 3 is risky, but you start to say, hey, I need to take a step back here and invest in my scene's future by giving the audience and my scene partner something else to play in. And once you get really good at this, finding a game in the verse, that's the ultimate. Where now we're alternating between 2 very fun verse and choruses rather than a very fun chorus and a real dumpy verse.
There's so much in there, AC, and it's so valuable. I mean, my thought just hearing you describe that is, part of what we're trying to do in comedy, and I think specifically improv comedy, which there's so much chaos built into not knowing what we're going to say, is it requires us to have an understanding of structure. Structure is the work that we have to do within improv. And for things to be funny, we're really aiming for this idea of surprise us with things that we already know. So the idea that you're going to take a break from something that's funny, that's working, and do something else allows you to bring it back, to create a mini callback within your scene that surprises the audience again. So you're surprising them with the thing that they already love. That is an incredible experience for an audience member to have. Doing the same thing over and over and over again is not going to give you the results that you're hoping for. So, we know that comedy, for the most part, is about tension and release of tension. If you've ever been to a horror movie and there's a big scare, usually it's a scare and then laughter that follows it. So that's also kind of what's happening in comedy as well too. It's we're creating tension, and then the laugh comes from a release of tension. Well, what happens when you eliminate all of the tension building and you just focus on release? Release, 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 release. I had that kind of experience. For some reason, I went to like a preview of that movie, that animated movie Sausage Party, and the joke per minute ratio was so incredibly high. And I don't say that as a compliment. It felt like someone was like pressing like the laugh button every second. And I was like, I just can't keep up, guys. I don't care about these people. I don't care about this story. I'm literally looking at this screen, imagining the writers be like, yeah, that one. Yeah, do that one. And that's not a great feeling for us to have. So what you're kind of describing about having these pockets where we're consciously avoiding what we know to be the purpose of the scene, the comedic engine, why we're performing in this scene, the funny part of this scene. By taking a break from it, you're increasing tension and you're allowing to return to this game. It's like you're fueling up. You do 3 offers in a row. The first one hits, the second one hits better, the third one hits, but you can kind of feel it fading a little bit. Oh, pit stop. We're going to fuel up this whole game of the scene, take a break. It's full of tension now, and now we can return it and apply it to something new within this scene. So I think that's a brilliant thing for us to do. The other thing I want to add on to what you've already said, which is incredible, is the idea of the pocket, the verse pocket. I love that pocket. That is actually one of my favorite things to do and improvise is to play within that pocket. Game of the scene, I know what I have to do. I gotta heighten. I gotta take this offer and I gotta expand upon it. But in the verse, I don't really owe anyone anything, because this is not the comedic engine of the scene. This is basically waste. Anything I do here doesn't contribute to the dominant energy of the scene. And if I know that this is waste, then I can talk in a way that we very rarely hear on an improv stage. Within that pocket, when you and I are playing together, I can say to you, hey, what do you know about Irish myths? Or whatever it is. Did you watch Boba Fett last night? Whatever.
I have so many thoughts.
We can have a conversation that is actually how real people talk, versus this kind of artificial, like, hi, Paul, good to see you here in the office. We got to get that report done by 5:00. Oh, don't write it like this. Write it like that. Or like 2 gravediggers. We got to dig this hole. What do you think the guy did? I don't know. What's that sound? Oh, it's haunted.
As a gravedigger.
Like this kind of art of... Yeah. And it's insane, because if you were digging graves all day long, I guarantee the last thing you're going to be talking about is shovels.
But, okay, so...
You're looking for some kind of other escape.
So here's the thing, because I agree with you. And that's what I think you're so good at is... of enjoying those pocket moments and throwing me a curveball. And it's not even a curveball, because it can be anything. The fun part for me is that when we go back to digging that grave and heightening how hard we're shoveling, heightening what we're digging with, all of this shit, and then we get a huge laugh from the audience, and Rob goes, Greek myths? You know anything about Greek myths? And now we've established a pattern within our verse. Simply by saying, hey, that waste that we created, still useful. We can still recycle this, right? We can upcycle it. And you just say, whatever I've done before is awesome. And that's what I love telling students of, like, hey, the majority of our issues come from when up in our heads we say, this isn't going well, let's change course. But if we can just say, this is awesome, even though it's not getting laughs yet, or I'm not really sure what it is yet, it's valuable if we return and heighten it. So that idea of the waste being like, we're starting to talk like George and Jerry from Seinfeld. We're in the middle of a scene and we get distracted and say, wait, are you eating my peanut butter with your disgusting index fingers? Like, what? I'm not eating bread now. I'm off bread. It's like, this has nothing to do with the scene. But it really takes a break from the narrative to get into the behavior. And so often it is the behavior is the chorus, and the things that we can't see, the things that are made up objects, those typically become the verse, the things that we can explore environment-wise, object-wise. But again, when we call it waste, I think we have to recognize that it's only waste once. But when we return to it, then that waste feels like it's compost and it's growing something else, you know?
Well, and this is when you're talking about, you know, pro level mastery of an idea, right? Which is what you've just described is creating two choruses. So you have chorus one, which is really good, working really well. And then you have another chorus, another game that you're playing. And this is how I would advise people to build complexity in scenes. You know, it would be a mistake for us to try and create 5 games at once and play them all within 30 seconds because, you know, creating that many things quickly, you're going to have shoddy craftsmanship. Probably most of them are going to get dropped. Probably all of them are going to get dropped. But if we can focus on, in the beginning of our scenes, doing one thing really, really well, and then once we know we have that home base, we can expand into other parts of the scene. Some people might criticize, you know, our thoughts on game of the scene as feeling a bit mechanical. It feels a little bit like, you know, I won the shoebox, I 2 the shoebox, I 3 the shoebox, I 8 the shoebox. Ah! Like that heightening can kind of feel a little bit like you can predict it, but I feel like if you take a step back and think about like, oh, well, I'm a narrative player and I really want to tell story. Well, the best way that you can tell a complex, interesting story with very high stakes is to have something that is working, that occupies both you and the audience, a dominant energy of that scene, and then from there branch out and then begin to tell that story. Or if you're really into object work or setting up the stakes, I think using it in that way is very, very helpful. The other thing I would say is that verses can sometimes fix a challenging chorus. So let's say, for example, I'm playing my one character. The guy talks like this. Yeah, yo, let's get fucked up. And it's a very thin character. This is a very thin character. It's almost a caricature. It's a little bit too big. It's loud. And maybe as I'm doing this character, I go, ooh, the audience, I have them, but I'm losing them. It's not enough. It's a little bit thin. I can use the verse as a character tool to build another dimension to my character without compromising that character, right? Yeah, let's get fucked up tonight. Yeah, 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 yeah. So, Teresa left. Yeah, she took the kids and she's just gone. Like in this verse, now I can show a kind of deep sadness to this dude and not wreck our fun. In a second, he's still going to be screaming and hanging off the chandeliers. But within this verse, now you see another layer to who this person is. And also kind of explains why he's behaving in this such big performative way. Well, he's doing that because he's hiding a kind of sadness.
Yeah, I mean, if we really want to simplify things, right, to make this technique more accessible, regardless of the form or the length you're doing, it's really just doing one thing, taking a break, exploring something else, returning to that one thing and taking a break, right? We're just, again, I always just say the peekaboo, right? Imagine a peekaboo where you never covered your face from the kid. They'll be like, yeah, I keep seeing your face. It's the same thing. But if you just take your face away for a second and then return your face, kid loves it, right? It's a jack in the box. It's all of these mentalities. So if you're feeling like, oh shit, I'm so in my head, I have to do it 3 times and then take a break and then 3 times. No, allow it to become yourself. Just being aware of, have I overstayed my welcome in this part of the scene? And if so, step away from it. Come back to it in a heightened manner. More rare, more severe, more inappropriate, whatever the show calls for. But that is the general idea. And you can take this and adjust it to whatever your needs are.
Yeah, and I think, as you're describing that just now, Adam, it made me think a lot about who has the power, and about the history of improv. Like thinking about Keith Johnstone at the U of A, and how the first rules of improv were formed. So Keith Johnstone, one of the founding minds of the 1970s competitive improv era. He would get untrained actors, I should say, to go on stage and perform without a script and without much structure, because he himself didn't quite understand what improv should be. And basically the way he did it was, you go on stage until what you're doing is boring, and then the next group goes up and they see how long they can go without being boring. And that's how the rules of improv, at least on the west coast of Canada, were developed, by saying, you are boring me, so now you're off stage. And there's an element of that runs under all short form, which is like, if you want to stay on stage, you have to leave it all out on the stage. You have to give me everything you have. And what you're talking about with verse and chorus is a kind of withholding. And it's kind of about taking power back. Where what you're saying is, I know, audience, you like this thing, but I am not obligated to give you that thing. In fact, I'm going to give you that thing when I decide. And in fact, I'm going to waste your time talking about Irish myths.
Which is never a waste of time. Never.
No, very interesting. But I can talk to you about Irish myths because you can't stop me. Because I have the power to indulge this moment or this experience for myself. And, that there's watching this or being on stage and feeling this, you can feel when the audience is lulled and forgetting about the funny thing that's waiting around the corner for them. That's a great feeling. Where it's like, I guess the scene's about Irish myths now? This is so weird. What happened? Oh, they're doing the grave thing again. Ah, crazy. I love that grave thing. So it really is changing the relationship between the audience and the improviser, and kind of undermining the kind of sycophantic mindset that a lot of us come up in when we're first learning how to do level A, level B, level C improv.
It's so interesting because building on what you're saying, if you've ever done any pachinko clown, it's the same idea, right? It's we are bored and we're going to let you know, and that's part of your training. Right? Your goal is to go out there, do whatever you want. You've got whatever it is, 3-4 minutes. Do anything. There is no restrictions. But we will tell you if we are bored. And if we are bored, you need to do something about it. And I think all of these, like sports, clown, improv, all of this kind of stuff, it's just different ways to entertain, different ways to get at the thing that you are trying to achieve. And it's just so interesting that it's really in almost every aspect of improv already. It's just, again, for me, how this articulation of it in my own brain was just like, oh, this helps me break it down to a way that is more manageable for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, as you're saying that, it reminded me of this Christian philosopher, I forget his name, but he was trying to explain why evil exists in the world. And he talked about a painting. He goes, if you were painting a picture, why would you put brown in it? Why not put all of the best colors? And the answer why you put brown in it is because brown makes the other colors pop. So he's using that to describe, evil as brown or whatever. But, when we're talking about the boring parts of scenes, that's the brown. Well, why do you have brown? Well, so the other colors can pop. I think that's a really great strategic way to look at scenes and scene work. Okay, Adam, this is where I ask you to do the thing that improv teachers aren't supposed to do, which is if you were teaching this and you had this problem, is there an exercise that you could do? Share us your curriculum.
Uh,
Share us what you would put into a lesson plan if you're having this issue.
yeah, it's so much of this, because it is so heady, is very difficult to explain. So I can give three general examples that might help. But again, in person, obviously, with examples of students, it's much easier. But just some simple things that you can do. Take the stage wherever you are doing your rehearsal, break it up into two sections. One is behavior and one is narrative. And physically, when you are in one of those sections, you can only talk or discuss or behave in that arena. And as the instructor, you can feel free to guide them, like switch, and they have to physically move to a different area. After doing a few of those where you guide them, allow them to guide themselves. Allow them to just feel it based on the other class reaction or their innate feeling of the way the structure should work. The next one is the one I kind of mentioned earlier, which is you give them a set number of allowances in terms of how they are allowed to heighten each idea. If you give them 3 and just let them start to feel it in their bones. What does it mean to be like, I said my third one, it still got a huge laugh. I guess I have to leave though. I don't get to ride this wave, just to get into that feeling of, even though this is going well, we want to interrupt it going well to prevent it getting stale. And so you're forcing these students, though, even though they're in a hot pocket, they have to move to the other side of the stage or move to the other idea. I've never done this before, but just as we're talking about it, thinking about timing things and just having a little like alarm on your phone where it's like every time this alarm goes off, you have to switch. And you can choose an arbitrary amount of time. But I think about when I was growing up playing Little League hockey. In hockey, it's an odd sport in terms of when you switch players, you don't need to stop the play. So they are changing lines on the fly, which is unusual for most sports. However, as a kid, that's too much to handle. So they just set 2 minutes, you're on the ice. Do whatever you want for 2 minutes, but then the buzzer will hit. Even if you're on a breakaway, doesn't matter. They stop it and say, you got to get off the ice. Another group comes on. So that's an option, all with the goal of just getting it into the player's bones of, even though it may not feel like the right time, you're investing in your scene's future by just saying, right, I should switch here to protect the longevity of this scene. So those are 3 ways that you could easily do that in a classroom setting, just to get people on board with feeling it for themselves, because it is quite heady. Just getting it more and more into your bones, I think, is the best way to share the information.
Yeah, and I think this is where short form can really aid us, like playing a game like Oscar Moment, playing Look, Don't Look, which is a game where while you are looking at your partner, I've seen it played both ways, but while you're looking at your partner, you're not allowed to say anything. And then when you don't look, you can talk. So it's big dramatic music in the look, and then when you're not looking, then you can continue on the scene. Yeah, playing a bunch of those games that have these very clear definitions of going from one thing to another thing will definitely get in your
One
bones.
more,
and it's
well, I was going to say, like, just as we're thinking of like, oh, right, here's things that can help because I might not be able to be physically with you. An exercise that we created of just having 2 people on stage, and you present an argument, an idea, something like recycling. Player 1 gets to choose. Am I pro or anti-recycling? Player B has to take the opposite opinion. Your only goal is to, every time you speak, is to back up your opinion harder. Therefore, we instantly force these players into a specific point of view on a topic, and then either by the teacher calling it or the player's feeling it, they have to stop the argument and go to their who, what, where. They're not allowed to establish a who, what, where first. No character, just point of view. After you've established how you feel or who you are, how you're behaving, then you can decide what would be a fun who, what, where to sometimes contrast this point of view or to just surprise us from within two people having this argument. Those kinds of things of just getting us into the habit of enjoying one aspect of a scene and then, against our better judgment, stopping it to explore another aspect.
Absolutely. So much good stuff there. I can't believe you're opening up your lesson plans to us, AC. Wow. We don't need you at all anymore. We're at the end of this episode. I'm just wondering, Adam, Michael, Holly, what is inspiring you on stage? What is inspiring you off stage? What are the things that you are thinking about?
There is a show that I am absolutely loving. Have you heard of The Other Two? Oh,
no.
Like, sometimes shows come along where you're just like, I actually laugh out loud. Like, you're enjoying it so much. So very quickly, the I guess you could say the star or the main, one of the main people of the show is Molly Shannon from SNL. She plays the mother of 3 children. There is a approximately 30-year-old woman who's really struggling with the direction of her life, a 30-year-old man who is a struggling actor, and then the youngest brother is like a 13-year-old boy who put out a music video online and instantly became the biggest hit in the world. So he becomes basically a Justin Bieber, and it is about this family dynamic of watching these 2 siblings, the other 2, deal with the fallout of this. And man, the Justin Bieber style videos and stuff, it's like that perfect balance between absurd and plausible, where you're like, this could be a hit. Like, I get it, but the lyrics are just dumb enough that it's funny. So it's on HBO. Fantastic. I think it's just 2 seasons as of now, but the other 2 is really tickling me. How about yourself?
That's so cool. I've been thinking a lot about this new development that's happening in graphic novels and comic books. Recently, the web platform Substack,
I've heard of it. I know very little.
So Substack is like a kind of website where it allows you to have a kind of weekly or daily, if you want, a newsletter, and allows creators to directly connect with their audience. You could put a paywall up for your own content. So, for example, we could put this podcast on Substack. If you wanted to listen to an episode, then we could charge you for it. We won't do that because that's not our style. But recently, there's been an announcement of comic book creators. Substack has partnered with comic book creators to create digital comics that are sent directly to your email. And this is really important if you understand how the comic book industry works. There's really only a few major publishers out there. There's DC, there's Marvel, there's Dynamite, there's Boom, there's Image. And it is incredibly competitive to have a book published at one of these publishing houses. And they control all of the terms and most often the IP of whatever you pump out. And now is the time in which, TV and film is looking to other mediums to create TV and movies. Like if you're trying to pitch a TV show, often you're going to get sidelined to make a podcast first, a podcast version of it. And then if that is a hit, maybe someone like NBC or ABC or CBS will pick it up and make it into an actual show. But you kind of have to have a proof of concept before you kind of move to the actual filming or writing of a TV show. So this idea of Substack offering this opportunity for comic creators is massive because it basically allows comic creators to build their own followings, create their own material, sell it for however much they want to, and retain all of the IP. It's basically subverting the whole, industry, how the industry works. And recently, one of my favorite writers, Grant Morrison, signed on, is putting out a kind of monthly book. And I think it's a really interesting thing to see. It's interesting to see how technology is making art more democratic, really protecting creators' rights. And so that's one thing that's making me really happy today.
That's so cool. It's like, like, I guess it's like a podcast platform where it's like a free market of, we'll publish, like, we put it out there, and whoever latches onto it, that's up to you. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's, in the same way that, we create our audiences on YouTube or through RRS feeds, comic creators are now able to do the exact same thing. So I think it's a really good opportunity for them, and hopefully changes the industry for the better. But we hope you enjoyed your time with us this week. If you do have a question like our pal Martin did, you can drop us a line on Facebook, Twitter, and now Instagram, which is strange. It's only pictures of Adam's face. It's at the Backline Pod. This podcast is brought to you by the Sonar Network. Other than that, AC, I'll see you next week.
See ya, and thank you to Martin and the whole Estonian improv community. Much love, and we'll see you soon.
May the sword be with you.